Maintaining continuity. Iowa's senior senator, Republican Charles Grassley, serving in Congress since 1975. A conversation with Senator Grassley on this edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
Iowa banks know you want honest advice about how to best reach your financial goals, whether it's financing and education, buying a new home, growing a business, or funding retirement. Iowa Banks, Iowa Values. MyIowaBank.com.
The Rotary Clubs of Iowa and Rotary International.
In 1985, Rotary International committed to a goal of ending polio worldwide. Very soon now, after immunizing over 2 billion children, the goal will be achieved. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Iowa Community Foundations, an initiative of the Iowa Council of Foundations, connecting donors to the causes and communities they care about, for good, for Iowa, forever. Details at iowacommunityfoundations.org. The Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure. Iowa Linked Up, Iowa telecommunications companies committed to ensuring Iowans have broadband connectivity for the 21st century. For decades, Iowa Press has brought you politicians and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond, celebrating 42 years of broadcast excellence on statewide Iowa Public Television. This is the Friday, January 11 edition of Iowa Press. Here is Dean Borg.
The new session of the nation's Congress is already underway. Officially, it's the 113th U.S. Congress. Republican Charles Grassley was there when the gavel fell to convene, just as he was for the convening of the 94th Congress back in 1975, and every session since then, first serving 3 terms in the House of Representatives and then moving to the Senate in 1981. Now, if you're counting, that's 6 terms in the Senate, with the current term expiring 4 years from now. That's January 2017. He's familiar with the guest chair here at the Iowa Press table. Senator, welcome back to Iowa Press. And I said that you were there for the convening, but you were there over the holidays too, and Congress never ends these days.
Seems that way. Thank you for having me as your guest.
It's nice to have you back. Yeah. And across the Iowa Press table, James Lynch, who writes for the Gazette published in Cedar Rapids, and Radio Iowa News Director Kay Henderson.
Senator, it appears that Vice President Biden plans, at least by next Tuesday, to present Congress with a gun control proposal. What do you expect?
I expect a mix of some control of firearm sales, something dealing with mental health issues, and maybe more federal programs in that area. And doing something to get states to do what they're supposed to do under existing law passed in about 7 or 8 years ago, that for every felony and for every mental health illness, to report that to the FBI so it's in the database, so that people like the incident in Connecticut, Aurora, Illinois, Congresswoman Gifford, I think we had a case in California recently. People that shouldn't have had guns because of, and they shouldn't have had them because of mental health issues. Beyond that, I don't know whether I've got enough information to tell you what else might be in there.
Well, one point of discussion immediately after the incident in Connecticut at the school was the discussion of an assault weapons ban, which had been in effect earlier in the last part of the last century. Do you support an assault weapons ban?
I would have to say no to that now, although I think that Senator Feinstein's writing a little bit different bill, but I did vote against it. But I think you want to remember that in this instance, passing a law on sale of guns is not going to solve the problem you just bring up that we had in Connecticut, because the Columbine school affair, where 12 people were murdered in Colorado, that was during the ban on the sale of guns. So we got to look at things different than just guns. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I think you know that. I also think, though, that we do have to do things to make sure the database of the FBI has all the information, so people can't buy guns that shouldn't have guns.
There's a corollary movement that's getting momentum too, and that is to seize on the momentum of this occasion, not only for gun control of some type, but also for some sort of mental health intervention. How do you feel?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we want to know that people have mental health issues shouldn't have guns. I think knowing that ahead of time and getting that information in is kind of a touchy issue that involves the constitutional rights of people, you know, the extent to which I think it's been 40 or 50 years ago, you know, these people used to be institutionalized, and it was declared unconstitutional to institutionalize them. We have medicine now that helps some people all the time. I think it's a very difficult thing to deal with, but since every one of these 3 or 4 cases that we're basing this discussion on that have taken place over the last 3 or 4 years are going back to Columbine, it's a very important issue we've got to deal with, and I don't have an answer for it, but we do have to deal with the mental health issue. But also the states aren't reporting the felonies that are committed in their states that should go to the FBI as part of the database.
Senator, Vice President Biden has suggested mental health background checks before someone can purchase a firearm. Should that be part of the legislation?
I don't know how you would handle that without interfering with the privacy of the individual and the protection that comes from HIPAA-type legislation. But if there's legitimate reason to think that somebody is trying to purchase a gun has a mental health problem, yeah, we should know that. But if James Lynch wants to purchase a shotgun, should you have to have a mental health test? I don't think I can go that far.
What about the size of the ammunition? That's been a part of this discussion as well.
I think that's a whole different issue and can maybe be dealt with without violating the Second Amendment, but I want to see the legislation.
So you might vote for something that would limit the size of what they call magazines, the number of bullets?
I would not say at this point, because Senator Feinstein has said her bill's going to be much different than the law she got passed in 1994, and I think I better wait till I read the legislation.
Also, this past week, the video game industry went to the White House to talk about this issue. What, as a U.S. Senator, can you do to restrict the freedom of expression of Hollywood and the video game industry?
Under the First Amendment, which is a fundamental right, just like the Supreme Court has said the Second Amendment now is a fundamental right, it's a very difficult issue because you got to remember the Bill of Rights was to protect people from the government, not to, and so we have to respect the fundamental rights that we have.
Senator, another issue you're facing in Washington when you go back to Congress will be the fiscal cliff, which seems to have become the fiscal cliffhanger with more deadlines looming in the coming months on sequestration and the debt ceiling. What do you expect to happen here? Is this just a continuing argument between the parties going ad infinitum?
I hope not, but before I say that, I probably ought to go back to what Kay brought up and you brought up, and it fits in right now with your question. I think it's very, very important that a lot of issues in Congress are second to this whole fiscal cliff issue, the debt limit increase debate, and also another thing we don't talk about much yet, but by March 27th, we've got the continuing resolution coming to an end, so how do you fund the rest of the government? Those 3 things have to come up between now and March 2nd and March 27th, and they're much more important than all these other issues that we probably will talk about in this news conference. So my answer to your question is that I think that it needs to be done if we're not going to reduce the credit rating of the United States, as some threat has been. But most importantly, the creation of jobs and to make sure that we leave a strong economy for future generations to build on and deal with it all. And more importantly than just dealing with the fiscal cliff, which deals with about 40% of all the money we spend, we need to get engaged in the debate about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, because that's 44% of the spending, and nobody wants to touch that. And if you really want to preserve these programs, and I do want to preserve them and strengthen them as part of the social fabric of our society, we have to deal with that 44% as well.
Another thing, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say House Republicans have shown reluctance to raise the debt ceiling. the spending limit. Do you think the president has the authority to do that on his own, and do you think he would take that step?
You're talking about the 14th Amendment provision. I read the 14th Amendment because this is a part of the 14th Amendment you tend to forget about. So I just recently went back and read it, and it seems to me that the authority that comes from the 14th Amendment to our federal government is related to preserving the benefits of people that fought against the resurrection, which was the Civil War. It seemed to me connected to that very much, that the fiscal integrity of the federal government isn't used to help those who rebelled against us, as well as to protect those who fought to preserve the Union. And so I see it unrelated, but it keeps coming up. Now, I haven't read, I don't think there's any constitutional law on it, court cases, but that's my reading of it.
Do you think a government shutdown is a bad thing?
Of course it's a bad thing. But on the other hand, $5 trillion of national debt under this presidency is much worse. And I think that what the House of Representatives is trying to say is that the president's talking about raising taxes. We have raised taxes now, and we've got a spending problem. We don't have a taxing problem. And what taxes have been raised, the decision that was made on New Year's Eve, is this simple, that if you got $1 trillion plus annual deficit, it takes care of about 6, 8, at the most 10% of that. What are you going to do about the other 90%? And that's what the debate between now and March 27th is all about, is dealing with the expenditure side of the ledger.
Another thing on your agenda coming up are confirmations that President Obama is sending over for new cabinet officers. And one of them is your fellow Republican Chuck Hagel of Nebraska. You've been reticent to say whether or not you'd vote for that confirmation. You said you want to wait and see. What gives you pause? What do you want to know? What gives you pause about a fellow Republican serving as Secretary of Defense?
Yes. I think 3 areas. One, statements he's made about our relationship with Israel. And secondly, he supported going into Iraq. But later on, something that was successful, the surge of Bush's, he opposed that. And thirdly, he's been against sanctions for Iran. I think Iran's very much a threat to world peace and to our own national security, and particularly to that area of the world. And I've got to be satisfied of his soundness in those areas if I'm going to vote for him.
And so right now, you could possibly vote against that confirmation.
Yes, I could. But here's another thing I should say in a more generic way. I generally don't make up my mind how I'm going to vote on somebody until the hearing's been over and I've had a chance to read the hearing record. And these 3 issues, and maybe a lot more about Senator Hagel, will be the foundation of most of the questions about him at that time, and we'll get answers that'll satisfy me or not, and I'll vote accordingly.
But you've already made up your mind, have you, on John Kerry, another colleague in the Senate?
I've said that the chances of my voting for him are pretty good, but I also said that I should wait till the record's done. But I know John Kerry, I think, a lot better than I know Chuck Hagel.
Jack Lew has been nominated by the president to be the Treasury Secretary. What questions do you think need to be answered by Mr. Lew before you would vote for him?
Well, first of all, I think Senator Sessions is very much opposed to his approval. And Senator Sessions, being the ranking Republican on the on the budget committees, going to be in a very strong point. Now, whether Lew goes before the budget committee, I'm sure he comes before our finance committee. So if Sessions doesn't get him a chance to ask questions of him, I'm going to ask questions of him that Sessions brought up February 2011 when the budget was presented, and he says this is a balanced budget. We're going to be able to start paying down the national debt. Well, that's just not the real world, you know. It's the way the world ought to be, but it's not the way the world is. It's the world we've got to make happen if we start making tough decisions on spending right now.
So did he lie to Congress? Is that what you're suggesting?
I would suggest that he either was speaking in rose-colored glasses, or else he was misleading Congress. I'm not going to say anybody's lying because I don't know what's in their heart, but he's absolutely wrong on the facts.
The president has also nominated John Brennan to be the head of the CIA. He's widely regarded as the person who's most closely associated with the administration's drone program.
Sure.
Do you approve of the way the drone program has been run in the Obama administration, and do you have any concerns about the Brennan nomination?
I approve of the drone program, but I have been hammering the president, along with even Senator Leahy, the chairman of the committee that I serve on. We do not have the written statements and the legal justification for the use of the drones, and I think that ought to be a matter of public record. And they even deny it to Democratic members of the Congress. But beyond that, it isn't the drone issue and Brennan that worries me. It's what did he know about Benghazi, and what did he do to in the White House to change the wording of CIA memos that were then used by talking points for Ambassador Rice when she appeared on television and said, you know, Benghazi's all about this film in California. It's got nothing to do with Al-Qaeda, et cetera, terrorist activity. And we know that that was entirely wrong. And we know that the CIA recognized it as being terrorist connected. And so the truth never came out. And covering up in government, particularly in an administration 4 years ago that said they were going to be the most transparent in the history of our country, have turned out to be more stonewalling than any other administration. We need to know the truth. The public's business ought to be public.
Senator, as the president has been making these nominations, he's come under some criticism for the lack of diversity. Specifically, he hasn't nominated enough women to satisfy some people. Does he have a problem there? Does he need Mitt Romney's binders to find some qualified women to serve in his administration?
I think any president ought to find the most qualified people they can for office. And I think that in the case of Chuck Hagel, there was a woman, former undersecretary, that was very qualified to do that, and he could have done that and saved himself a lot of trouble. I don't say that just because she's a woman, but I think it's very important that you try to go as broad as you can. You can't write half of the population off if you're considering who's qualified to serve, but just to do it for diversity, I think is wrong. You ought to pick people because they're the most qualified.
I guess I'm concerned about your agenda, and I want another thing on your agenda coming up now in this session of Congress is the Farm Bill. It should have been the last session.
You're right.
Wasn't renewed, but you extended what was in force. So it comes up again during this session and it expires again in September. Will you, in the Senate, do you expect pass a farm bill much like the Senate passed last session, but the House rejected?
Well, I think now there's two things. One, it's not election year, so I think the House was afraid to bring up the Farm Bill during election year. So that helps us. And the other thing is that the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee said that by the end of February he's going to get started on legislation, which moves it much faster than they did before. And I believe that we do not have much of a change of the House Agriculture Committee that we can pass in a bipartisan way through the United States Senate like we did last June, a very good farm bill. I think the major issue is not going to be farm policy. It's going to be how much money to spend on food stamps. We saved $4 billion. The House saved $16 billion. Some House Republicans said $16 billion wasn't enough. Democrats in the House said it was too much. So that made it very impossible to get even a bipartisan vote in the House of Representatives. That's the main problem, not the farm policy.
Is that still a problem? That is.
Yeah, I think it would be, particularly now as we get into the things that James brought up, the fiscal cliff, March 2nd, the budget debate coming up March 27th, and the debt limit increase.
Thank you. Yeah.
What sort of immigration reform would you support?
Well, I think it's pretty important to support. I think it's pretty easy to support a lot of things that are going to be in the immigration bill. Then there's one thing I'll get to that makes it very difficult. I think, first of all, how to do it, the process is pretty important. I think passing one massive immigration bill is going to be very difficult. I think it needs to be done piece by piece, and I think that's the way the House is going to do it. But border security, the fence, more border patrol. That's pretty much done, but it still needs some more emphasis. Verification of Social Security number through Social Security, we call that E-Verify. Increasing penalties for people that are hire illegal people that come here illegally. Have a good guest worker program, some reforms of the H-2B program, things like that. Then you get down to this 900-pound gorilla, and that is, what do you do about the 12 million people who are here? There's people in Congress says we ought to make them citizens right now. There's other people that would say, you know, they ought to go home and come back legally, because we do allow almost 1 million people coming into this country legally. So we're a very inviting nation, more than any other nation in the world. We learn from immigrants, and we can even learn a lot from these people that have come here illegally. They're family-oriented. They've got good religious background. They got good work ethics. We can learn a lot from them. But the problem is they violated the law by coming here. Now, how you handle that, I don't know. But if you're going to have a comprehensive piece of legislation, you got to find common ground, and I don't know what that common ground is right now.
Senator, over the past few years, we've learned a lot about you from your use of Twitter, the social media network. And you have been posting some cryptic, sometimes abbreviated and misspelled tweets about the president and UNI women's volleyball and the History Channel and your run-ins with deers on Iowa highways. One of the more memorable tweets was this, where you said, President Obama, while you sightseeing in Paris, you said time to deliver on health care. When you are a hammer, you think everything is a nail. I'm no nail. Talk about your use of Twitter. What do you get out of that? Do you get conversations with constituents and colleagues as a result of your tweets?
It's the latest, and some teenagers tell you it's not the latest, but for me it's the latest of technology that I try to use, going back to my introduction of the fax machine, having television news conferences with satellite, you know, the use of my website, all of these things. I think Twitter is just the latest. I have a responsibility to encourage public debate. What's representative government all about? I'm one half of that process of representative government. You, my constituents, the other one half of it. I got to encourage dialogue, and this is one way of encouraging that dialogue.
I'll dialogue with you right now on Afghanistan. President Karzai is in Washington right now, pleading, I guess, as to what the U.S. status of forces should be after withdrawal. Because of the blood and treasure that this country has invested in Afghanistan, what do you think ought to be the remnant left behind?
Well, I hope the president's plan is right, and I understand that he wants to leave some troops there, although this week he said there's a possibility of no troops to be left there. But I think that we're seeing what's going on in Iraq right now, the conflict that's going on, that it was a mistake not to have a status of forces agreement with Iraq. Maybe 1,000, maybe 10,000, I don't know what the number is, but we need some presence there to make sure that what gains have been made, the blood that's been shed, that it isn't wasted.
Senator, let's talk about your presence in the Senate. When you were last on this program, you talked about it, and we have a little video that shows what you said a year ago.
Okay.
Will you run again?
You know, you asked me that question a year earlier now than you're asking it now. Immediately after I was reelected in 2004, you asked me if I was going to run for reelection, and you know, I said, yes, I'm going to run for reelection. I just announced that I'm 78 years old, and I think I have a responsibility to the people to be a little more cautious this time, and maybe, why don't you ask me that question about 2 or 3 years from now? And I think I've got to be in very good health. I'm in very good health now, but I've seen too many people like Strom Thurmond or like Robert Byrd, when they were 90 years old or 100 years old, took 2 or 3 people to get them around the Senate. One of them even had a nurse with him all the time. And Chuck Grassley's not going to try to represent the people of Iowa in that state of health. So if you would give me a little bit of time, I'll let you know.
Well, so I think Kay wants to pop the question again. Kay?
Go ahead.
Are you going to run again?
Why don't you ask me in 2 years? But let me assure you, I'm raising money, and most important thing is to focus on the job we have now. I think that's been the strength of my longevity in the United States Senate, is the people don't see me as campaigning for election. They see me as doing my job of representing the people, going to the 99 counties every year, answering all my mail, and staying engaged. But the most important thing is to concentrate on the problems that we have with deficit spending in Washington, D.C. right now, and get this economy under control to create jobs so our future generations can have the same quality of life that we've all enjoyed.
Senator, whether you make that decision to run again or not, one of the questions facing you is regarding the Iowa Republican Party. It seems to be going through a bit of a rough patch right now, and sort of infighting, some lack of direction. What role are you going to take in trying to get things back on track and making sure the party's strong enough to help you get reelected as well as other Republicans?
Well, first of all, I think these folks are Republicans like I'm a Republican. I think they're doing a very good job. We've seen Republican enrollment go up 37%. We've seen Democrat enrollment come down about, did I say 17%? About 37,000, I believe. We've seen Democrat enrollment come down 68,000. We're about par with them. I'm helping raise money as an example for them. As an example, I think we're in a pretty good position. We're having a governor, the State House of Representatives, half of the congressional delegation. I think that we're going to continue to be strong.
Well, with that, we're going to say we'll have you back, what, another year from now, or when?
Well,
because we
I
want
suppose
that
when
question
Kay
again.
wants to pop the question.
Yes. Thanks for being with us today. Yeah. Next week on Iowa Press, Governor Terry Branstad will be questioning the governor just a few days after his annual condition of the state address to the Iowa General Assembly that convenes on Monday. The day after convening, legislators will be hearing the governor's address, and you can too. Iowa Public Television will be at the Capitol next Tuesday morning at 10, bringing you the Republican governor's speech. And we'll bring perspective and Democratic reaction as well. That's live at 10 Tuesday morning. It'll be on IPTV World and online at iptv.org, and then rebroadcast Tuesday night at 6:30 on IPTV's main channel. And then the next day, we'll bring you Iowa Supreme Court Justice Mark Caty's State of the Judiciary speech, live at 10. That'll be on IPTV World and rebroadcast at 6:30 on IPTV's main channel. And earlier in the week, we'll bring you a pair of intelligent talk conversations from the Business Education Summit. Both speeches airing on Monday. That'll be January 13th at 7, and then the other speech at 8 o'clock that night. Lots of good listening ahead. I'm Dean Borg. Thanks for joining us today.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
Iowa banks know you want honest advice about how to best reach your financial goals, whether it's financing and education, buying a new home, growing a business, or funding retirement. Iowa Banks, Iowa Values. MyIowaBank.com.
The Rotary Clubs of Iowa and Rotary International.
In 1985, Rotary International committed to a goal of ending polio worldwide. Very soon now, after immunizing over 2 billion children, the goal will be achieved. Rotary, humanity in motion.
Iowa Community Foundations, an initiative of the Iowa Council of Foundations, connecting donors to the causes and communities they care about, for good, for Iowa, forever. Details at iowacommunityfoundations.org. The Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure. Iowa Linked Up, Iowa telecommunications companies committed to ensuring Iowans have broadband connectivity for the 21st century.